I should stop the quiz. Yes, your next concept is inter-process communication, ma. You can put the subheading as inter-process communication. You're following me? Am I audible? Can I start the class? Yes, only Jahnavi is responding. I request you all to on your cameras, all of you. Please on your cameras, all of you. Yeah. See, every time I cannot ask you number of times to on your cameras, right? I don't understand what is your problem to show your faces. So what do you mean by inter-process communication? Can anyone tell me? IPC, inter-process communication. Between different processes. Okay. Yes, I will tell you. See.
It is like the
Yeah.
communication between different processes, ma'am, for the
Okay, okay. Yes,
synchronization of
yes.
process. That
When we
is,
are using multi-processing, right? When you are using multi-processing, that means what? Multiple processes are getting executed simultaneously. Yes or no? When more than one processes are executing, right? How they can exchange the data? They should communicate with each other, no? Right? As a part of their execution, right? See, here we have two types of processes, ma. We can call them as independent processes, right? Cooperating processes. If a process is getting executed as its own, that means it is not having any relation with the other processes. That is independent process. As a single whole, that process will get executed, right? Then we have cooperating processes. Cooperating process means there the processes can communicate with each other, right? The mechanism of that communication is called inter-process communication, right? We'll see in detail, right? See, the processes within a system may be independent or cooperating. You all know that when the processes are getting executed concurrently in the operating system, right? When they are executing concurrently in the operating system, that means what? Multi-processing, right? So there the systems may, there the processes may be independent processes or cooperating processes. So when you call a process as independent process is if it cannot affect or be affected by the other processes executing in the system. You are getting me? A process is called independent process if it cannot affect or be affected by the other processes executing in the system. That is, any process that do not share the data with any other process is independent. It should not get affected by the others, it should not affect the others, and if it is not sharing any data with the other processes, then we can call it as independent process. Clear? Okay. Now, when you call a process is cooperating process, when a process can affect or be affected by the other processes executing in the system. That is, any process that shares the data with the other processes is called cooperating process. Clear, no? Independent process and cooperating process. Clear? Yes? Okay, done. Now, so why we should provide an environment that will allow the process cooperation, right? Why we should allow the processes to cooperate with each other? Why we should allow the process to share the data, right? Right? So if you see the third point here, it is telling you the reasons for cooperating processes, right? You can also say the reasons for providing an environment that allows the process cooperation. So here, the reasons for cooperating processes are information sharing, right? Information sharing. Second one, computation speed up, modularity, and the convenience, right? So what do you mean by information sharing? When multiple processes are executing in the system, right, there several users may be interested in the same piece of information. That means there we have a data where all the processes wants to use the data, right? Like we have a file, shared file, right? So most of the programs that are being executed wants to retrieve or get the data from a shared file. So there we must provide an environment to allow the concurrent access to such information. So that is the first reason, information sharing. Second one, computation speed up, right? So if you want a task to be run very faster, then what you do, you divide the task into subtask, right? Each subtask will be executing in parallel, right? With that, you can achieve the computation speed. So if you want to execute a program very fast, then what you do is you divide that into subparts. That means you can use threads concept or whatever sub processes, right? So using that, each thread will get executed in parallel, no? So when you are dividing a process into subtask, definitely to get the work done or to make the process execution, those processes should be communicated with each other, right? So with that I can say computation speed also one of the reason for cooperating processes, right? So but when this is possible, when your system have a multi-core processor or multiple processors available in your system, then only it is possible, right? Dividing the program into subtask, and each subtask can get executed in parallel when it is possible, when you have multi-core processor or when you have multiple processors in your system. What do you mean by modularity, right? So that means if you want to construct your system in a modular fashion, that means dividing the system functions into separate processes or threads. What do you mean by modularity is dividing the things into modules. So if you want to divide your system in the modular fashion, that means you are dividing your system functions into separate processes or threads, right? Then the cooperating processes should exist. Last one is the convenience. That means even though if it is a personal computer, right, an individual user may work on many tasks at the same time. Yes or no? That means you will be editing something, or you will be listening to the music, or you are compiling a program. Means all these things you can do in parallel in your multi-programming system, right? So there also you require the cooperating processes, right? So these are the reasons for cooperating process. Clear for you all the four? Yes? Information sharing, computation speed up, modularity, and convenience, right? So these are the reasons for the cooperating processes. Now, cooperating processes need inter-process communication. What is that? That means cooperative processes requires inter-process communication mechanism that allows them to exchange data right? This IPC will allow the cooperating processes to exchange the data, right? So you have two fundamental models of this inter-process communication, right? You can call them as shared memory and message passing, right? Shared memory and message passing. You have two models of IPC here. So in the shared memory, what happens? A region of memory that is shared by the cooperating processes is established. So how they can exchange the information here is by reading and writing the data to the shared region. The shared memory means they have a common shared memory region is there. There multiple processes can get access to that shared memory. How they are going to exchange the data is if one process is writing the data, the other process can read the data, right? So that is how with the shared memory the communication is possible. When you take the message passing, in the message passing model, this communication takes place by means of messages exchanged between the cooperating processes. Right? How they can do it is they will exchange the messages, the small messages, right? So with that, they can share the data. If you see the communication models here, you have two models here, A and B. So A will tell you the communication models using the message passing. The B will tell you with the shared memory, right? So first you see the diagram B. You have the operating system running and this is the memory. There you have a shared memory location where process P1 and process P2 both are sharing the common location where A is writing the data into the shared memory and this data is read by the process B. Right now, if you take the diagram A, that is message passing you have process A and process B, right? So these two processes will get communication through the kernel, right? First, it will send a message to a kernel in the form of the system call, and that message will be given to the process B, right? And you have the message queue also, where all the messages will be kept, right? So when there are so many messages that are waiting in the queue, which has to be um, taken care by the kernel, right? So the operating system is using both the models, both the model shared memory and the message passing, right? So when we use this message passing it is useful for exchanging the smaller amount of data, right? It is used only for exchanging the smaller amount of data. Why? Because conflicts need to be avoided, right? That means when one process is communicating with the other process, right, then that process, no other process should get involved or no other process will send a message to these processes. So to avoid the conflict, we use this for exchanging only smaller amount of small messages, right? So where we use this message passing is useful in the distributed operating systems, in the distributed environment. Why? Because in the distributed environment, the devices are located in different places and they are connected with the network, right? You all know what do you mean by distributed system. In the distributed system means what? The different devices from the different locations can be connected to a network where they can share the resources. So in that case, they need to be communicated with each other, right? So for that, we use the message passing because the devices in the distributed environment will be having their own memory locations. So their shared memory is not possible. So that is the reason this message passing is used in the distributed environment, right? When it is coming to the shared memory, I can say shared memory is faster than the message passing. Why? Because shared memory means the memory will be there in the same system. Multiple processes will be referring to it, right? So there won't be much operating system involvement. Why? Because first creating the shared region is done by the operating system. Then after, these processes will be sharing the location. That's all. So for that, first of all, what they have to do is, here first they should remove the restriction on the memory. Normally, how it will be, when a process is referring to a memory location, that memory location will be locked by the operating system, and operating system will not allow any other process to read the data or to get access to the data. Yes or no? You are following me? Yes, following me? Yes? Yeah, okay. See, yeah, that means when you have a shared memory location, normally how memory will be handled by the operating system is, when a process is accessing or it is using that memory location will be logged to that device. That is also a resource, no? That resource is allocated to that process, right? Then after, if any other process is asking for that location, that will be sent to the waiting state until the current using process releases that memory location. But to achieve this inter-process communication using the shared memory, then what they has to do is, first the two processes should agree, right? They should agree that they are accessing that shared memory, and synchronization part also will be taken care by the processes only. Then they should request the operating system to take the restriction on the memory region. They will ask for a memory region. That memory region will be created by the operating system. Then restriction will be removed. Then the processes will be using that shared memory for the exchanging of the messages, right? You are getting me? Why I am telling the shared memory is fast is, they require only one time the operating system access. That is, only one time they require to generate the system call. Only to create the region, they require the system call. They will create the system call. But when it is coming to message passing, every time for each message, here the kernel involvement is there. Yes or no? First, they will, for sending a message, first they will generate a system call, right? Then that system call will be providing that service. That means they will, this kernel will exchange the information. So that means for each and every message, right? They are supposed to create a system call. That means it will keep more burden on the kernel. So that is the reason we can say the shared memory is faster, right? The shared memory is faster in the implementation. So system calls requires more time consuming task of kernel intervention. So most of the time is getting wasted here, right? But when it is coming to the recent research, right? When you have the several processing cores, nowadays all the systems are multi-processor and multi-core systems only, no? Right? So what the recent researches on the systems with the several processing cores, that indicates that message passing provides better performance than the shared memory. Right? Here, message passing provides better performance than the shared memory. But when in the multi-core systems, when the shared memory is used, it is suffering with a problem called cache coherency issue. You can make a note of it. The shared memory is suffering from the cache coherency issues. What do you mean by this? This is when multiple processes are getting run, right? And they are sharing the common data, right? The shared data is migrated among the several caches. That means how many processes that are accessing to the common data, the data is migrated in the several caches. So if the cores on the system increases, when the number of cores in the system is increases, right, we can say the message passing is the preferred mechanism for the inter-process communication. That is all about the introduction to this shared memory and the message passing. So let's start with the here you have the advantages of this cooperating processes. So these are the advantages also you can write: information sharing, communication speed up, modularity, and the convenience, right? Let's start with the shared memory systems. You can put the subheading as shared memory system. So now we will see in detail about the shared memory and about the message passing systems, right? So when it is coming to the shared memory systems, so this inter-process communication using the shared memory requires communication processes to establish a region of shared memory. This you all know that, right? They should establish a region of shared memory, right? So that means a shared memory region resides in the address space of the process creating the shared memory segment. So that means who is creating that shared memory? Let's consider there are some few number of processes are getting executed. Then among one process created the shared memory segment, right? So this shared memory segment will be reside in the address space of the created process, the process which is creating that, right? That memory segment will be residing in the address space of that process. Now, any other process that wish to communicate using the shared segment, right, they must attach it to their address space. So whenever the other process wants to use that same location, they want to share the location, right, then they must attach it to their address space, right? There, for that, what they has to do, we all know that the operating system tries to prevent one process from accessing another process memory. The same thing which I explained just now, right? So here share memory requires that two processes agree to remove this restriction. They should agree to that. Then they can exchange the information by reading and writing the data in the shared area, right? So this data and the memory location, the shared memory location that are not under the control of the operating system. This I already mentioned, right? So the process also responsible for ensuring that they are not writing to the same location simultaneously. So even though they are sharing the memory region, here they should be careful that they should ensure that no two processes are writing to the same memory location. So let's consider there you have a file, in that you have a data item called, there is a variable called I, right? So at a time, two processes should not attempt to update that variable. So, right? So to make you better understand this shared memory systems, right, we are considering a problem that is called producer consumer problem. So you can take that it is the scenario which was given to explain this shared memory inter-process communication model, right? So if you take the producer consumer problem, very simple, ma. So here a producer produces the information that is consumed by the consumer process, right? So producer will produce the data and the data is consumed by the consumer, right? So here if you take an example of this producer consumer, in the real time I am giving you an example. See, a compiler may produce the assembly code. If you are executing a program, a compiler may produce assembly code that is consumed by an assembler. Now, in turn, right, the assembler may produce the object modules that are consumed by the loader. You're getting me? How this producer consumer scenario works is, if you are executing a program, a compiler may produce the assembly code that is consumed by assembler. Assembler may produce the object modules that is consumed by the loader, right? So this is how a producer consumer scenario works, right? Here, not only for this inter-process communication, this producer-consumer problem will also provide the metaphor for the client-server paradigm also. So if you take client-server paradigm, right? So there also you can see this producer-consumer scenario. That is what is a server as a producer and the client as the consumer, right? So a web server produces the HTML files and images which are consumed by the client. That is nothing but web browser requesting the resources. So if you are opening a browser, there you are entering some website name. That is, you are the client. Then loading the content of the website, the HTML files and the images on your browser will be done by the server, right? So this is also a producer-consumer scenario, right? So your web server will produce the HTML files and images which was consumed by the client. That means which was read by the web browser. So for this producer-consumer problem, how it can be solved? By using the shared memory. That means it will allow the producer and consumer to run concurrently, right? So to make this possible, they should have a buffer of items. They should have a buffer of items. So in that buffer, the producer will be filling the buffer and the consumer will be emptying the buffer. So where this buffer will be residing, the buffer will be residing in the region of the memory, shared memory. That is shared by the producer and the consumer processes. So here a producer can produce one item while the consumer is consuming another item. So here that means a producer and consumer must be synchronized. So we will be discussing this producer consumer problem in detail in the third unit where we are discussing about the synchronization. Right? Why I am telling they must be synchronized is, here the consumer cannot consume, they cannot try to consume an item which was not yet produced. So that is why I am telling that they must be synchronized. Right? So here two types of buffers are used, ma. One is unbound buffer or unbounded buffer. The other one is bounded buffer. Right? So what do you mean by this unbounded buffer is, so this unbounded buffer has no limit on size. The consumer can have to wait for new items, but the producer can always produce new items. When there is no items in the buffer, then the consumer should wait. But the producer can put any number of items in the buffer because it is unbounded. There is no restriction on the buffer size. But when it is coming to the bounded buffer, it is the fixed size, right? Here both consumer and producer have the restriction. When there is no items, the consumer should wait. When the buffer is full, the producer should wait. Right? So this is the bounded buffer. Right? So here, when the buffer is not full, then only it is correct, ma. Here the buffer size I am defining it as 10 and we are putting the items, right? So if the buffer size item buffer equal to buffer size, that means when you are putting the items, the buffer size will be defined in that way, right? So Initially, in is 0, out is 0. What do you mean by this in and out, right? So the pointers, we can call them as these are two logical pointers, ma, in and out. The variable in points to the next free position in the buffer. In refers to the next free position in the buffer. Out points to the first full position in the buffer. Right? We are defining two pointers here, in and out. What do you mean by this in is in points to the next free location in the buffer. Out points to the first full position in the buffer. So from the first full position, the item will be taken out by the consumer. By using this in, the item will be kept in the buffer, right? So for this producer consumer, why I am telling the solution is correct when the buffer is having these items, buffer size -1 items means the buffer is not full. If the buffer is full, then they has to wait, right? The producer has to wait, right? This is for the bounded buffer producer program. Very simple, ma. So when this condition is satisfied, he can produce an item. Sorry, when this condition is satisfied, the buffer is full. So the producer cannot put the item. When in is equal to out. What do you mean by in is equal to out? The top of the means the top of the element is equal to the next taken item. That means the buffer is full. The consumer is not taking any items. The buffer is full now. Then the producer has to wait until the consumer takes one item, right? Then if the buffer is not full, then what happens is a buffer in item. So the producer will keep the item in the buffer. And the in will become in plus 1. Okay, item పెట్టేశారు కదా, then the top position, the top of the item will, the location of the top of the item will be increased in equal to in plus 1, right? When it is coming to the consumer, when in is equal to out, right? There is nothing to consume. That means here the buffer is empty. The buffer is empty. So in the top one here, in is equal to out is equal to in plus 1 percentile buffer size count means buffer is full. It is equal to 10 ani, because we defined the buffer size as 10. But here in is equal to out means, right? It is equal to 0 here. There is nothing in the buffer. There is nothing to consume. So here the consumer will do nothing. It will wait for the producer to produce the items. Now, if it is not empty, remove one item from the buffer. Then what the consumer will do is he will take out one item, and then what he will do, out will be out plus 1 percentile buffer size. So the next read location will be increased, right? Initially, if he is reading the 5th item, then plus 1 means he should now read the 6th item, right? The next, that way it will be done. Then he return item means whatever the item he is taking out from the buffer, that item will be read. So this is how the producer consumer problem will be explained, right? So the scheme allows at most buffer size -1 items in the buffer at the same time. This point you should make it as a note, right? So this is all about your shared memory, and the scenario is of message passing, producer consumer problem. So it is clear for you? Yes, producer consumer problem. In detail, how the synchronization will be handled, we will see in the 3rd unit. Third unit, you have synchronization. There again, we will be discussing about this producer consumer problem. Give 2 minutes break, then we will see message passing, right? Let me have my quick breakfast. Do you have any idea when you have Ramjan holiday? 13th, 14th? Means 15th. Do you have any idea about your vacation? Oh, you got the information officially. This bounded buffer is over now. Oh. Inter-process communication for message passing. Yes. So this is the another way of achieving this inter-process communication, right? That means here the cooperating process, they will communicate with each other via the message passing facility, right? So message passing provides a mechanism to allow processes to communicate and to synchronize their actions without sharing the same address space. You can make a note of this. Message passing provides a mechanism to allow the processes to communicate and to synchronize their actions without sharing the same address space. So once again, I am mentioning that it is particularly useful in the distributed environment where the communicating processes may reside on different computers connected by a network. So for best example for this message passing is internet chat program, right? That is designed that participants can chat, right? They can chat to communicate with each other by exchanging the messages. So how this communication can take place? A message passing facility provides at least two operations. What are those? Send and receive. Right? Send is used. Send operation is to send the message. Receive operation is to receive the message. Right? So here the messages sent by a process can be either fixed size or variable size. Right? So if we are using only the fixed size, right? The system level implementation is easy, right? You have fixed size messages, right? Always the message size is limited. System level implementation is easy, but the programming makes more difficult. You have to write the program in such a way that when the message size is exceeding this much, it should not allow or it should break the message, whatever, right? So that is when it is coming to the variable size, right? System level implementation is more complex. That means it is unlimited message size, no? So in the system level to handle the messages, the implementation will be difficult, more complex, but programming task becomes easier, right? Let's take the other point. Then I am taking an example that if the processes P and Q wants to communicate, right? They must send messages to and receive messages from each other, right? So for that, what they have to do first, they should establish a communication link between them. If the two processes wants to communicate, P and Q, that means what? They can exchange, they can send message or they can receive the message. So to do that possible, first they should establish a communication link. So this link can be implemented in different ways, ma. So the physical implementation we are not discussing here. That comes with the computer networks, right? You can say it is a connection oriented or connectionless, whatever. The communication links, it can be a dial-up connection or whatever. The physical things we are not discussing here, but when you see the logical implementation, right? So we have different methods for implementing this link, right? That is using the send and receive operations. So the the communication link implementation can be done in three ways, ma. The logical implementation, right? One is you can call it as direct, indirect communication. It's there. Okay. Now make a note of it. I am telling you. It can be direct, indirect communication, synchronous or asynchronous communication, automatic or explicit buffering, right? The logical implementation can be done in three ways by using the operations called send and receive operations. They are direct or indirect communication, synchronous or asynchronous communication, automatic or explicit buffering. Now, let's start with the see, when you are implementing this, when you want to establish a link, so these are the questions which are to be asked, or you have to question yourself when you are making this message passing possible and when you are implementing the link. How are links established? Can a link be associated with more than two processes? How many links can there between every pair of communication processes? What is the capacity of the link? In the size of a message that the link can accommodate fixed or variable. Is a link unidirectional or bidirectional? So when you are having a link established between the processes, these many questions which are to be asked, or you are supposed to be answered these set of answers, right? Questions. So how are links established? How we can do it? If I tell you that indirect logical implementation, these are the three things, and physically how you establish is you should have a connection between two processes, right? Uh, and can a link be associated with more than two processes? That based on the implementation, a common link can be shared between multiple processes, or it can be a dedicated link between the two processes, only the sender and receiver. How many links can be between every pair of communication process? Mostly it will be only one. That is mostly the bidirectional one we will have, right? What is the capacity of the link is based on how they transfer the data. If they are transferring large amount of data, right? If they are sending so many messages, then the capacity of the link will be high, right? Based on the usage, how they are using the link. Is the size of message that the link can accommodate fixed or variable? It depends on your message implementation only. You can have the fixed length message, or you can have variable length message according to your operating system design or your system design. The size of the message will be there, right? So is a link unidirectional, bidirectional? Here they should communicate. They should communicate means what? Both can communicate with each other. So if you make it bidirectional, it is easy for you, right? You can make the communication faster. Now, coming to this direct communication, we will discuss about this direct, indirect, synchronous, and buffering, right? So when it is coming to this direct communication, so here each process that wants to communicate must explicitly name the recipient or sender of the communication, right? That means the processes must name each other explicitly. So we are using a concept called naming in the direct communication, right? So here the communication can be direct or indirect. So I'll tell you what do you mean by indirect and what do you mean by direct here, right? But when it is coming to the direct communication, in that the process must explicitly name the recipient or the sender of the communication. So here we will be using two primitives, send and receive primitives, to define the processes, right? So if you see the first one, send P comma message, that means send a message to process P. Here the sender is defining, right, the receiver. He is explicitly naming the receiver as P. So when sender is sending a message, based on the name of the receiver, the message will be sent to the receiver. Now, receive Q comma message, that means receive a message from process Q. So if you are using the primitive receive, that means here it should mention the sender. That means the receiver is receiving a message from the sender Q, right? So the communication link in this scheme has the following properties. What are the properties here are? The links is established automatically. That means the link is established automatically between every pair of the processes that wants to communicate. That means here the processes need to know only each other's identity to communicate. So in the direct communication, link must be established. The links are established automatically. When they both wants to communicate with each other, link will be established automatically. But here, the process should know each other identity. That means the sender should know that with whom he is communicating. In the same way, the receiver also should know that with whom he is communicating, right? Here, a link is always associated exactly with two processes, right? Whatever the link we are having, this is exactly associated with two processes, right? So between each pair of these exists exactly one link. We'll have only one link. So whatever the questions we discussed here, it has been answered in each and every different types, right? Types of implementation. So in the direct, the properties will be like this. A link will be established automatically. It is between only two processes, and only one link exists between two processes. And here the link may be unidirectional, but is usually bidirectional also. You can have both. It may be unidirectional, but maximum it is bidirectional only. Why? Because when the both are communicating, definitely it should have the bidirectional link, right? So if you take this scheme, it exhibits symmetry in addressing. That means both the sender and the receiver processes must name the other to communicate. Right? They must name the other to communicate. That means if A wants to communicate with B, A must name the B. Right? So you have another variant of this also, that is called asymmetry in the addressing. Here only sender names the recipient. The recipient is not required to name the sender. Right? Here, you are getting me? In the addressing, you have two schemas, symmetry and the asymmetry. In symmetry, both sender and receiver has to address, or they should name the other to communicate. But in the asymmetry, only sender has to name the receiver. The receiver need not to name the sender. That means how the sender primitive will be like this: send P comma message. How the receive primitive will be there: receive, no name, only ID comma message. That means receive a message from any process, right? The variable ID is set to the name of the process with which the communication has taken place. So when the receiver is receiving the message, right, the variable ID at the time that will be given with the name. Initially, you need not to have that. So you have the disadvantages with this both, right? That is the limited modularity, right? The disadvantage is the limited modularity of the resulting process definitions. That means, see, the process named itself as P, but after that, the process ID got changed. When the process ID got changed, it is very difficult to examine where that old ID is existing, and it should be renamed with the new ID, right? So that is the problem, that is the disadvantage with the symmetry or asymmetric addressing, right? You're getting me? Symmetry, asymmetry means, right? So we will be using a hard coding technique, right? Here where identifiers must be explicitly stated, which are involving in the indirection. That means, okay, it is very difficult to get the old names, no? So for that we will be using some techniques, hard coding techniques. So where the identifiers must be explicitly stated. So we will identify, but it is very time consuming and implementation also very difficult, right? So this is all about the direct communication. Now coming to the indirect communication. So with the indirect communication, the messages are sent and received from the mailboxes or ports. You can also call them as ports. The messages are indirected and received from the mailboxes. So a mailbox can be viewed abstractly as an object into which messages can be placed by the processes and from which messages can be removed. Right? You're getting me? Right? So if you take an example, I can say like each mailbox has a unique ID. So how the mailboxes can be identified here? Here processes identification kadandi. Here mailboxes will be identified. Right? Each mailbox will have a unique ID. So if you take an example of POSIX operating system, right? So this POSIX message queues uses an integer value to identify a mailbox. They will be using an identifier for identifying the mailboxes, right? Now, if you take the second point, processes can communicate only if they share a mailbox. That means, best example I can say, you have a WhatsApp group, right? So to read the messages, to write the messages, first of all, you should be the person of the group. So the same thing it is telling you, the processes can communicate only if they share a mailbox. If they are a member of the mailbox, then only they can be able to communicate with each other. Just like we give the names for the groups, here each mailbox has a unique ID, right? And one more thing, a process can communicate with another process via a number of different mailboxes. That means a person can be a member of multiple groups, yes or no? In the same way, a process can be a member of multiple mailboxes. That means he can communicate with any other process via a number of different mailboxes. But the two processes can communicate only if they have a shared mailbox. Yes or no? If you want to communicate with a person, that means you both should be in the same group. Then only the communication is possible. Right? You're getting the points? The two processes can communicate with each other only if the both are members of the mailbox. That means if both are sharing a mailbox, then only it is possible. So we use two primitives here, the send and receive primitives, right? So you can define the primitives like send a comma message, receive a comma message. That means send a message to mailbox A, receive a message from mailbox A. So here the properties of the communication link can be a link established only if the process share a common mailbox. That means the same thing. The process can communicate with each other when they belongs to a common mailbox. That means the link established only if the process share a common mailbox. Link may be associated with many processes. That means here, if you are a person of a group, that means you can communicate with any person in that group. That means a link may be associated with many processes. That means a process can communicate with many number of processes using this indirect communication. Each pair of process may share several communication links. Right? Each pair of process may share. That means the two processes, right? The pair of processes, they can have the multiple several links. That means the two people are in multiple groups. First mailbox, second mailbox, third mailbox. That means for each mailbox, they can have a separate communication link. So that is the reason I am telling each pair of process may share several communication links. Here the link may be unidirectional or bidirectional. See, this is the primitives are like this. Send a comma message. That means you are sending a message to mailbox A. Receive a comma message. Receive a message from mailbox A. Right. So I am giving you a simple scenario here. We have three processes in a shared mailbox: P1, P2, and P3. Right. Here a process P1 sends a message to A. Right. Here P2, P3 execute a receive. Right. Which process will receive the message sent by P1? Here, you are getting my point. There are three people in the mailbox. A sent a message, right? Here, P2, P3 both will execute the receive, right? Now, actually, who will receive the message sent by P1? It depends on the method we choose, right? It depends on the method we choose. That is, allow a link to be associated with two processes is most. That means you can send a same message to more than one people. Two people you can send. You can also allow at most only one process at a time to execute a receive operation. Right? Or you can also allow the system to select arbitrarily which process will receive the message. Either P2 or P3, but not the both will receive the message at a time. So for that, we will be using some algorithms. Like if you are using round robin, right? The process take turns receiving the messages. That means first P2 will receive, then P3, right? Then in the order based on the algorithm we are using, the message will be received, right? You understand when a message is sent in a group, right? Who will receive that message? That depends on the methods we are choosing, right? If you are choosing that it is for the more with the two, I want to share the message with two people, then P2, P3 both will read. Or else if you want to allow only one person at a time, right? When you are using the execute when you are that means it allows only one process to execute the receive operation, right? It will not allow P2, P3 will do the receive. It will allow only one process to execute the receive operation, right? Then or else you can allow the system to select arbitrarily which process will receive the message. Who will receive the message anedi, it can be decided using the any kind of the algorithms, right? So when we are discussing the means when we consider the mailboxes can be created by a process or it can be created by the operating system also, right? So if the mailbox is owned by a process, then we distinguish between the owner and the user, because each mailbox has a unique owner. There won't be any confusion about which process should receive a message sent to this mailbox. But what is the disadvantage of having this user mailbox? If the process created a mailbox, when the process got terminated, the mailbox will be terminated. That is the drawback with the mailbox created by a process. But if an operating system created the mailbox, right? If the operating system has created the mailbox, then The OS will take the decision how long the mailbox should be exist, right? Excuse me. Right. So when the mailbox is created by the operating system, I can say it is independent and not attached to any particular process. Right? So here the operating system will provide the mechanism for this operations and creating a mailbox and send and receive messages through the mailbox, destroy a mailbox. All right. Excuse me. So this is all about your direct and indirect communication, right? So this part we already discussed now. When P1, P2, P3 are sharing the mailbox, P1 sends who will get the message, right? So for that you have the solutions here. You can allow a link to associate with at most 2 processes here, or else only one process at a time. You use some kind of arbitrary, or you use a kind of we can use any algorithm, or else sender only will notify that who is the receiver. Next is synchronization, right? So what do you mean by the synchronization? So communication between the processes takes place through the calls, send and receive primitives in this, right? So there are different design options for implementing each primitive here, right? Here, the message passing may be either blocking or non-blocking. So you can also call them as synchronous or asynchronous. In this synchronous and asynchronous, the message passing may be a blocking or non-blocking, right? So blocking can be considered as synchronous, non-blocking can be considered as asynchronous. When it is coming to the blocking, the operations are blocking sent and blocking receive. Blocking sent means blocking sent has the sender block until the message is received. So once when we are using this blocking sent operation, when a sender sent a message, until that message is received, the sender will be blocked. What do you mean by block receive? It has the receiver block until a message is available. That means receiver will be blocked until he receives a message. Right? You are getting me? These are the different operations on the synchronization. Right? The non-blocking means non-blocking sent means the sender send the messages and continue. There is no blocking. The sender can continuously send the messages. So non-blocking receive means the receiver receive a valid message or null. If there is nothing to receive, he will not be in the blocking state, but he will do nothing. He will not he will do nothing because there is no messages to take, read or whatever, right? But the sender here is non-blocking. That means the sender can send any number of messages continuously. Right? So here the different combinations of send and receive are possible, right? So when both sender and receiver are blocking, we have a rendigious between the sender and receiver. That means this is like producer consumer problem. The same thing will be applied here when the both sender and receiver are blocking, because the sender sent and it got blocked until the message is received, right? And here the receiver is blocked because he is waiting for the message, right? So the solution to this problem is when we use this blocking send and receive statements, right? So the producer invokes the blocking sent and waits until the message is delivered to the receiver, and the consumer invokes receive and it blocks until a message is available. So with this, by using this kind of combinations, you can able to solve this producer consumer problem. That means producer will not produce anything until the receiver receives it. It will be blocked. Once the receiver receives it, then producer will be unblocked and producer will be producing the other item. Right? And until the producer produces the other item, the receiver will be blocked. So that way, by using this synchronization, you can able to solve this producer consumer problem. Right? So this is about the synchronization. Next, you have buffering. So whether the communication is direct or indirect, right? The message exchanged between the communication processes, they will reside in the temporary storage map. Whatever may be the communication, they will use the buffers at the sender end, at the receiver end, right? For storing the data temporarily, right? Before the receiver retrieves the data, it should be holded in the buffer. So here you can implement the buffers in 3 ways, ma. Zero capacity buffer, bounded capacity, and unbounded capacity. So what do you mean by this zero, right? Zero capacity buffer means here the queue has a maximum length of 0, that the link cannot have any messages waiting in it. Buffer 0 undi ante enti? There is no messages waiting, right? In that case, what happens? The sender must be blocked until the receiver receives the message. అంటే ఏంటి ఇక్కడ బఫర్స్ అన్ని ఎంటీ ఉన్నాయి. సెండర్ బఫర్ is empty and receiver buffer is empty. That means what? The message is in the communication link. So here the sender will be blocked until the message receives at the receiver side, right? Now, bounded capacity. Bounded capacity means here the queue has a finite length n. That means you can hold n messages in it. You can hold n messages in it. That means here if the queue is not full, the sender can send the messages continuously until the queue becomes full, and receiver can take the messages continuously, right, until the buffer is empty. This bounded capacity means here the queue has a length of n. That means at most n messages can reside in it. So if the queue is not full when a new message is sent, the message is placed in the queue and the sender can continue executing without waiting. Right? Here the link capacity is finite. However, if the link is full, the sender must block until the space is available in the queue. ఇక్కడ link కూడా కన్సిడర్ చేస్తాం. If the link is full, then the sender must wait. If the link is full, sender is keeping the messages in it, means what? The messages will be discarded because the link is unable to hold the messages. The third one is unbounded queue. Here you can say the queue length is infinite, potentially infinite. That means any number of messages can wait in it. Then the sender never blocks. Here the sender will never be blocked because the buffer size is infinity. So initially you have zero capacity buffer. That means buffer cannot hold any messages. That means here the sender will be blocked until the receiver receives the message, because there is no buffer here. Buffer capacity is 0. Next you have bounded capacity. That means buffer capacity is some n. That means it can hold n number of messages. So in that case, the sender can send the messages until the link becomes full. Here, if the link is full, the sender has to wait. Then you have unbounded. That means here infinite length. That is, the sender will never wait, right? So here the zero capacity is sometimes called as no buffering. That means no buffer is available in that, right? The other cases we can call them as automatic buffering. First one is no buffering. Second and third are automatic buffering, like we can call them. So this is all about your inter-process communication, right? So some scenarios are given like this. Examples of POSIX, Mac, Windows, right? You can refer to this if you want. I will share you this. How communication takes place in client server. You know this sockets, right? RPC and remote method invocation is there in the Java. So about the sockets, it was given. It is some additional concept in your this IPCMA. You can go through it. It is not required. It will be not asked in the examinations, but if you want, you can go through it, right? So that is all about the inter-process communication. You have any doubts, ma? You can ask me, uh, or else we can wind off. It is clear for you all. Please respond, all of you. 70, 72, clear? Okay, today I will share the notes and PPT. Notes I will not share. Why? Because it will be uploaded in the test letter. If you want PPT, I will share the PPT. Can I share the PPT with you? Right? About this, what processes, then about the threads, then about the scheduling algorithms, right? So there's three I will share after the class. Thank you so much. So we will be having one more class. We will see what we can discuss in that class, because we got the instructions that we should complete 2 units. In the test letter, mostly in 2 days. Okay. So shall I end the class? Okay, ma. Thank you. Lab exam ఇప్పుడేం ఉండదమ్మా. Lab programs we will give you four programs we will give you to do. You are supposed to do it in the test letter, right? Then if you have any doubts in that, we will discuss. Lab exam will not be after your summer break. We may plan internal one like that. Okay, ma'am.